is money's role in enabling or disabling very foundational rights, and finding a monetary network and a monetary system that acts in the best interest of the people and that cannot be manipulated and controlled by a central point of failure, by someone that has whatever malicious intent or interest to act against those that don't deserve that. And I think there's a severe lack of education, especially in the more developed and privileged world, that our money works, more or less. And it's very important to not only understand that in majority of the world, not only does their money not, but the power of their money is used violently against them and is held in such concentrated control. And so I actually, listen, I'm not going to sit up here and be naive about the fact that Bitcoin's a very complicated topic and it's a wide array of differing opinions about Bitcoin. One of the mental models I want to deploy in this conversation, I'm curious your thoughts, is thinking of Bitcoin as more of a tool and not a speculative asset. I think one of the more popular ways to think about Bitcoin is a digital version of gold, and I'm sure we've all heard about that. But what I want to try and instill and discuss very quickly is Bitcoin somehow, through very complicated engineering and just pure innovation, was able to create a monetary network and a monetary asset that carries properties that are very foundational to supporting human rights and disabling authoritarian regimes or dictators, right? And acting in the best interest of the people, and the people can rely on Bitcoin because it is uncensorable, unconfiscatable, is truly distributed. And if you think of it is a digital rock that lives amongst the clouds, is how I like to think of it. That's why I like to put it in the slide. It doesn't live with under anyone other than the people in a distributed fashion. And using this tool, whether you think Bitcoin is going up or down, or you think to the left's opinion or the right's opinion, it's a very, very important concept to understand that the ability to escrow value digitally, move value at the speed of light for the first time in human history, on your own merit, on your own time, sovereignly, without needing the permission of anybody, especially in the majority of the world, is such a powerful concept. So I'm curious, given the story you just told and the experiences that you've lived through, I know a lot of people where I'm from want to see an ETF. And that's, I think, one of the more improper ways to think about it. What do you want to see? What does Bitcoin mean to you?
Well, for me, like you said, to me, the most important part about Bitcoin is the monetary network itself, right? If you look at the situation in West Africa right now, we said, okay, there are 15 countries for whom, basically, again, France controls their money itself, right? But how do we get away from that? The idea is like, in the future, are these governments going to make the digital money itself? Is it going to be France? Is it going to be startups, right? The idea is that if it's governments making this digital money, they're going to print as much as they want, ultimately, right?
Yep.
So for me, what I want to see is a monetary network that is not controlled by the governments, that is not controlled by the French, and I am able to send money here from Norway or from America, where I live right now, send money to my mom, and have her basically be able to get this money, cash it on the other side by using basically the Bitcoin network. And the way that it works is that, let's say any company right now that basically implements Bitcoin, I can just take my wallet that's made by a company in the US, send this money to my mom, and she can on the other side basically turn this money into mobile money and get the cash in Senegal itself, right? So the idea is that, again, the money is not broken in a developed world. In Norway, in America, money works. We have a way to like really go to a bank really quick, open up a bank account, get a credit card, and get pretty much like all these banking services. Unfortunately, in Africa, banks are pretty much like luxury brands, because a bank will never open up a branch in the village itself, right? So how do we service these people? Personally, I believe that the future of banking is going to be Android, most likely an Android device connected to the Bitcoin network itself, right? And we can send value from anywhere in the world, and anybody who basically joins this network participates in the network effect of this monetary system itself. That's what I want to see, personally.
100%. And so I'm going to transition to this slide. And just to try and put a little bit more words as to what Fode was alluding to, here's the power of Bitcoin as a tool. Listen, again, speculative biases aside, take a look at this slide. You can use Bitcoin as an instrument to escrow value anywhere in the planet. It's unconfiscatable, it's uncensorable, it is truly accessible if you think about similar to the internet's ability to escrow information. Bitcoin has the same properties and the same capabilities to escrow value. And so yes, can it be used as an inflation hedge? Absolutely, absolutely. Can you opt out and opt into a monetary policy? Absolutely. But it is actually also a superior payments network. It's a superior way to have native interoperability and connectivity to transmit value at the speed of light without the permission of anyone else. And so in this infographic, it's illustrating the ability for someone from the United States, presumably, to initiate a $100 transfer. So my company, for example, but many others, allow you to connect a bank account. You have no idea you're using Bitcoin. No idea. We use it because it's actually just a superior tool to escrow value anywhere in the world. Connect your Chase account, and you want to send $100 to Senegal. What the software is allowed to do, you take the $100, you convert it to Bitcoin behind the hood, you're able to escrow value at the speed of light, across an ocean, across a border, across different jurisdictions, across different regimes. And then that physical value, physical digital bearer instrument, how do you digitally move a piece of paper? How do you digitally move a rock? You can't. You can digitally move a physical instrument in Bitcoin and it will land anywhere in the world, and then an ability to convert it back into the preference of the receiver. And so in that way, this illustration works if Bitcoin is $10, if Bitcoin's $100,000. If no one values Bitcoin other than a penny, we're able to do this and aid towards the fight for freedom, which is why we're here in Oslo, right? And so I don't know if you have any other context here, but it's a mental model that I think is tremendously, tremendously, tremendously important, is that Bitcoin is not only for those to hedge the Federal Reserve's CPI metric inflation that gets reported in the United States. It has an enormous, enormous potential to create interconnectivity and network effects globally and empower things that were previously just very simply not possible.
Exactly. And for me, what I want to actually add to that again is that these particular countries have a problem because there is not cross-border commerce in West Africa itself, right? If you look at Europe, the EU itself, right, it is so connected. They are doing business like between each other, sending goods from like one border to another itself. In Africa, actually in West Africa, it is not like that specifically, right? So for me, what I want to see is like, how do we connect these 15 countries that are there? And like, again, do we have like actually a startup build this technology? It would take too long. Africa right now cannot wait itself, right? So the idea is like we have a monetary network that works itself. How do we connect to it to pretty much solve the problems that we have today, and Bitcoin works today? And that's why for me, that's why actually it's interesting, and that's why we can leverage it to have like more cross-border payments and have nations develop together, as a matter of fact.
Together is the big point. The
Exactly.
way that we talk about Bitcoin internally as a payments company is we think of it as the global payment standard for the world. Think of it this way. There's an open, accessible set of instructions that if you integrate these instructions, you are interconnected with the entire planet to settle value at the speed of light and at no cost. And no one can tell you otherwise, and no one can deplatform you from that. And if you want to use it, you have every right. If you don't have to. But if you need to, you can. And that is the tremendous property that Bitcoin enables. And there's also one more point I want to highlight that I think is very important. In a lot of the places that money doesn't work, that we're trying to describe. In a lot of the places that money is not, there aren't resources allocated for money to act in the best interest of the citizens that very need it. Bitcoin uniquely, it has this property of being open. And it being open, and I'm curious your thoughts on this as well, is very important because of the network effects. So if someone in Senegal, for example, integrates this payment standard, they also share in the work of the world that's integrating on that payment standard. They also get the benefits that Jack Dorsey and Square and Block also are building on this. And so a potentially under-resourced, deplatformed, lesser privileged part of the planet gets to share in the work and the innovation of the world. And that's why open networks win. I don't care what over-controlling powers and overreaching that you do, you cannot, like, freedom prevails, and that's why we're here. And Bitcoin has that very unique network effect, which I think the progress of a developing nation in their monetary innovation, if they use this open payment standard and get to share in the work of those all over the planet, it truly makes it unstoppable. This is not a project that's going to take 100 years or 50 years or 10 years. I mean, in the last 2 years, you and I have experienced tremendous change, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, even